Hello, dear students. Hope you are all preparing for your exam. Let's take a look at the essay on familiar style. A brief summary of this essay. We'll discuss the main points that William Hazlitt discusses in this essay. William Hazlitt, as you all know, is an English literary and social critic who is best known for his informal essays, which are elegantly written and cover a wide range of subjects. He was keenly interested in philosophy and published his first book, an essay on the principles of human action, in 1805. His books include characters of Shakespeare's plays, The Round Table, Table Talk, political essays, The Plain Speaker, The Spirit of the Age. It's considered to be an autobiographical work. He's a drama critic as well, and he wrote a long biography of Napoleon Bonaparte, which was published towards the end of his life. The essay that we are going to learn, that is on familiar style, is about two different writing styles. In this essay, he discusses two writing styles and he prefers one over the other. And he gives the name as familiar style versus florid style. And he prefers familiar style to florid style. And throughout the essay, he tries to define these two different kinds of writing style. He gives examples from the history of English literature. He quotes a few writers and says that these writers, they adopted this sort of style, but on the other hand, there were writers like Johnson who resorted to florid style. So shall we see the characteristic features of these two different styles? He begins the essay by saying that it's not at all easy to write a familiar style. We think that to write in a familiar way is very easy, but he says, that is very difficult. It's a natural way of writing, but it is difficult. It is very easy to write in an affected manner or in a learned manner. You can look into the dictionary, find long words, you can borrow words from other languages, you can search for obsolete words, and then you can write in a very learned manner using circumlocution, beating around the bush, in an indirect way. You can use language, metaphors, in a very pedantic way you can write, and it is easy. But to write naturally with feelings, with a substance, it's very difficult. He goes on to say that if you lack substance, if you do not have real stuff in you, then you have to resort to florid style. You will stoop to florid style. But if you have stuff, if you have something in you, substance, then a familiar, natural way of expressing things would make it clear, and the piece of that writing would be impressive. But on the other hand, if you lack substance, in order to cover this lack, you are forced to resort to this florid style, pedantic style, a learned way of writing. And then he moves on to say that he talks about, when he say it is a natural style, it's a familiar style, it is not a common speech. You are not going so low. It's not about being vulgar and common, but being natural. That is something different. And then he gives a comparison. He says, you have seen people preaching on the pulpit, maybe in the church or while giving sermons. So there is a tone, the language used, the style adopted to preach a sermon on the pulpit. That is different, right? And also words used in stage declamation or stage performances. That is different. And there is people who use language, the vulgar dialect, the clownish pronunciation. That is an extreme opposite of this stage performance. So, actually, when he speaks about familiar style, you should resort to a middle course. You are not stooping low, or you are not assuming the tone of a preacher. It is different. He says, he gives examples from the history of English literature and says about the writings of Dr. Johnson as well as Charles Lamb. These are the two writers that he resort to mainly. He says Dr. Johnson, he used Latinized words, polysyllabic words. So he doesn't actually support Johnson's writing, but on the other hand, he says Charles Lamb, he too used archaic words or old-fashioned obsolete words, but his topic or his the themes that he dealt with was so revolutionary for that period of time that his use of this archaic style was justified. And he compares Charles Lamb to the renowned Renaissance scholar Erasmus. He says this familiar style is universally acceptable. It has got a universal appeal. Everybody would like that style. It does not evoke any sort of vulgar associations, and it is devoid of pomp and pedantry. It avoids obsolete words, gaudy words. He says, he brings in another analogy from stage performance. If there is no stuff, no real plot or story to tell the audience, the players, they will resort to pompous dressings, gaudy costume, then lightings, and towards the end, this is the analogy that he brings in. Lights and sound effects would be used to camouflage the fact that there is no much stuff inside. But if you have real stuff in you, you don't need these kinds of decorative ornaments to cover that. Did you get it? So this is the main thing that he talks about a familiar style, and he gives the name florid style, which is the opposite of the familiar style. You know that is, those are words. When words are used to conceal the absence of substance. This style is characterized by the use of pompous and pedantic expressions, and it is not plain or direct, uses roundabout way of expression. So these are the main things that he deals with in this essay. If you have analyzed the previous year questions, you can see that there are questions, 2 mark question, one mark questions, 2 mark questions, 4 mark questions, and also essay questions from this chapter. So don't avoid this lesson. Please read once or twice and get to know about the main point that he is discussing. I hope now it is clear, right? He is actually trying to distinguish between two styles, florid and familiar. And he says, and he gives examples from the history of English literature. He brings in Dr. Johnson's writing and Charles Lamb's writing. And he says, he gives the characteristic features of these two styles. And if you look at the question paper of 2009 in July, there are questions, 1 mark questions, like what is wrong with Johnson's style according to Hazlitt? So what was he talking about Dr. Johnson? He couldn't accept Dr. Johnson's writing because he used polysyllabic words, Latinized expressions. So this is the fault that he has found out on Dr. Johnson's writing. Coming to two more questions, again, there is one question from this. What does Hazlitt mean by familiar style? So you need to write in two, three sentences, a small paragraph, a short paragraph on familiar style. And sometimes you may get an essay question as well. You have to summarize the entire essay and talk about the familiar style, the features, and contrast it with her florid style. What is familiar style in one single sentence? It's a plain sentence, plain style, devoid of obsolete, old-fashioned words, which is direct, which is plain, which reveals the substance, right? And coming to the paragraph, long paragraph answers, again you find one question. How does Hazlitt admire Charles Lamb? So you need to write about his opinions on Charles Lamb. Charles Lamb also used old fashioned expressions, obsolete words, archaisms, but he says that this Lamb, this use of these words by Lamb is justified. He says that Lamb identifies himself with earlier writers, the writers that he used to borrow from the medieval writers so deeply that even his awkward and old fashioned style appears natural and spontaneous. So that is one reason why he justifies Lamb, because though he borrows words from the medieval literature, it appears as if he has imbibed that what do you call it comes from him so naturally and spontaneously that we think that he has imbibed the spirit of that age, and that is one reason why he supports Charles Lamb. And also he says that Charles Lamb's ideas are so radical. The essays that Charles Lamb wrote, in those essays, the ideas which were expressed, they were radical. And if they were expressed in the prevailing style, in the style of that time, then it might have appeared out of place. So his use of archaic style is justified. So the use of archaic style neutralizes their impact and the impact of that revolutionary subjects that he was dealing with. So he had this admiration towards Lamb, and says that he is comparable to the renowned Renaissance scholar Erasmus. So just summarize his opinion on Charles Lamb. So these are the two writers that he mainly focuses in the essay, Charles Lamb and Dr. Johnson. Coming to the essay, again, you find one more question. Discuss Hazlitt's reflections on familiar style. So give a small introduction to the writer Hazlitt. Then you need to summarize the essay, the main points, compare these two styles that he talks about, florid style and familiar style, and write about these two writers, and end with the analogy of the stage performance, where he talks about the lack of substance which is concealed by sound effects and light effects by the players. I hope this is clear, this essay, and please look at the questions also which are given behind the text. I know here there are questions like, how does Hazlitt praise Charles Lamb's style? Again, the same one. Why does Hazlitt dislike Samuel Johnson's style? Comment on Hazlitt's statement that familiar style steers a middle course between stage declamation and vulgar dialect. Stage declamation or stage performance, which has this rise and low tone, the theatrical cadence, or the tone of the preacher on the pulpit, and the vulgar dialect. It's not it's not both of these. It steers a middle course. It's not too low, and it's not the style adopted by a preacher. It's a middle course. And the essay question, what according to Hazlitt are the characteristics of familiar style? So you can write about the author, come to this essay on the familiar style, and then try to define the familiar style, what according to Hazlitt is a familiar style, the different features, and then come to the opposite one, that is florid style, which is used to disguise the lack of substance. Write about these two writers that he talks about, Charles Lamb and Dr. Johnson. I hope this gives a gives a brief idea about this essay on familiar styles. Thank you.